Hey there everyone. Today what we're going to do is learn how to take subscription payments from customers. So in the instance here, I've created an application where we're a teacher and we're able to create our own online school, and we're charging students a subscription fee for access to our courses. So what we're going to do is first of all look at the Stripe gem itself. So let's head on over to stripe.com. Got some pretty good documentation for Rails. So we'll go to the documentation there. On our website, we'll click. You'll notice this piece here. This is useful for later on when we're actually testing the Stripe cards out. There's a dummy card number we can use, 3-digit CVC, any 3 digits are fine, and a valid expiry date. Anything in the future is fine. Let's head on over to Rails, and what we'll do first of all, let's add in the gem. I've already added the gem in, so if we go to our gem file, make sure we paste it anywhere up here was fine. And then what we'll do, we will run bundle or bundle install. Bundle is fine by itself. From there, what we want to do, we actually want to generate a migration to add in some columns to our users table. So from our devise model, we've got a users table. So let's head on over to our schema. You should see in your schema, you'll have a users model and you'll have a series of column tables within there. So what we want to do in here is add in whether or not the student is subscribed. So it's going to be a boolean, a true or false. And we also want to add in whether or not the Stripe ID for the student, so that we can actually access in Stripe who that student is. So what we'll do, we will go Rails G migration, add subscriber and Stripe ID to users. And what we want to do, we want to have subscribed as a boolean and Stripe ID as a string. So what we want to do is keep the Stripe ID as a string. The reason for that is it's not going to be an integer this time. Stripe will hand back to us a Stripe ID that can have letters and numbers in it. So let's put that through. And what we'll do, we'll go over to our migration that we've just generated. And you can see here that it's picked it up. So add column to the users table in the subscribed column, and it's going to be a boolean. And similarly for Stripe ID, it's going to be a string. Great. What we want to do now is we'll rake db migrate to initiate those changes. And importantly, once that migration has completed, what we want to do is let's restart our server so that it all works. So once we've updated it and restarted our server, so that's up and running. So we can see that that's all still working. Let's go back into here and let's generate a controller for the subscribers. So Rails G, short for generate, controller, subscribers. And this will give us actions of new and update for our Stripe API. So you can see that I've actually already generated this previously. So what we'll do, let's go into our subscribers controller and we'll create a new action. We don't actually need to add anything in. Stripe takes care of the new piece for us, so there's nothing to do there. On the update action, what we actually want to do is add in the token that the user actually takes in from the JavaScript that we'll see a bit later on. So what we'll be adding in right now is we can go over to the Stripe documentation, or alternatively I'll just write that in. So token equals params, and we'll take in the Stripe ID. Now this is from the JavaScript. This is the Stripe token that gets taken in. What we want to do now is create a new customer. So Stripe, create this new customer through the API. And let's add into that the card. Now the card is simply a token that gets created at the time once the user adds that in. Plan, we haven't talked about this yet, so what we'll do, we need to specify a subscription plan for this customer. So what we'll do now, I'll get you to create a Stripe account. I've actually already created one, so let's head over to stripe.com, and I'm already signed in. I can simply click Open Dashboard, but that will be signed up for you. I'll go into my dashboard, assuming you've already signed up, and I'll go to Account Settings, and I'll just show you very quickly where we can get access to the API keys, which we'll show you in a moment. So they're the test secret keys and publishable keys, as well as the live keys, which I've blanked out as well. If we go into plans, you can see I've created some plans already. I'll create another dummy plan just to show you what we're talking about here. So we'll give our plan an ID number. Let's call it 1020, and we'll call it the monthly light plan, and let's make that $9 a month, and let's make that Australian dollars. We won't have a trial period, and the description on the statement is monthly light plan. So let's go and create that plan, and we can have a look at that. Our ID, which we need to remember, is 1020. So that's our plan number. So let's go back into the code, and our plan number is 1020. Great. The next piece is the email address for the customer is actually the current user who's signed in. It's going to be their email address. Okay, so that's the customer created. Now what we want to do is set the current user to actually be subscribed in our database. So current user dot subscribed, that's now true. The default was previously false. So current user dot Stripe ID, that's going to be set to the customer ID. So the ID of what we create back up here, it's going to be this customer ID. So that lets us know in Stripe who is who for the students. So let's go and save that. And lastly, let's go and redirect that back to, now I call it projects path. This is the path where the student now, once they've signed up successfully, can see all of the courses that are available to them. Okay. What we want to do as well is, importantly, we want to make sure that the user has to be actually signed in as well. So let's make sure that they're authenticated. Okay, so let's go and authenticate the user and make sure we have a bang in there as well. Okay. So now, next what we want to do is we want to go into our routes file and update the routes so that we've got access to the subscriber route. So what we want to do is we'll add in a resource of subscribers. In addition to that, and I'll show you in a minute where we're getting this, is we actually want to get access to the registrations controller from Devise. So the way we do that is we set this up like this, where we're stipulating the registrations controller in here, and we're actually using our own that we're about to create now. So it's called registration. So it's looking for something called registrations controller. So what we're going to do, let's go and make a registrations controller. The reason that we're using a registrations controller is once we have successfully passed sign up and we've successfully made payment, we want to be able to redirect the user through Devise over into the courses page. So let's go into our controllers and we will create a new registrations controller, which I've done in here. Importantly, it inherits from Devise registration controller. We need to make it protected as well for security, and this method here is from Devise. So after sign up path for the resource that we're using, and we need to consider the subscriber's new path. So that lets us know now that we're able to go from the subscriber's new path over to the new projects path, which is all of the courses that the student has access to. Great. Next from here, what we want to do is we want to be able to configure the initializers. So if we go back into the tutorial that Stripe has for us, you can see we've done the gem, we've made the controller. This time we used a subscriber rather than charges. This is because they're simply charging single one-offs, whereas we're on a subscription plan. That's why we went and created a plan. So you'll see that they've got an amount, we have a plan instead. So we have updated the routes, and we've got a subscribers route and resource, sorry. And the next thing now we want to do is actually instantiate the keys that we've got. So the keys, those API keys I showed you before, let's go and add them in. So let's go and create a file called config initializers stripe.rb. So let's go over to config initializers stripe.rb. We'll create a file, stripe.rb. Simply paste that in. Now you can see here there's a publishable key and a secret key. What I like to do, because oftentimes you'll have a number of different keys, it's always useful to actually add what they are at the front. And I'll show you in a second why this becomes important. So we're accessing a Stripe publishable key and a Stripe secret key instead now. Where do these get accessed? So in the tutorial, it suggests that every time you restart your server, you're actually adding in the keys with them. Now this becomes a bit cumbersome after a while, so the best way to handle this is actually set environment variables in your local machine. So what we'll do is, if we go into the root folder of the machine, and I'll just open up Sublime. I'm using ZSH in my terminal, so I'll go to my ZSHRC file. You can see here that I've actually already added in. So what you'll want to do is I've added in these Stripe publishable keys and Stripe secret key. Where do you get them from? So let's go over to account settings in our dashboard. We'll go to API keys, and this here is where we'll find both the Stripe test secret key and the test publishable key. Always use test when you're in development. So we'll grab those keys and paste them like we have here, making sure that there's no spaces either side of the equal sign as well. So the important thing to note once we've done this is this won't work until we've actually completely shut down all of the tabs in our iTerm or terminal, and we've restarted terminal. So I'll get you to do that now. If you can restart and close down all of the tabs you've got, and close all of those down, and close your iTerm down and restart that. I've already done that previously. The way to check whether or not these environment variables are now working is simply type env and press enter. And what you should be able to see is a list of all of the environment variables from that file that are accessible for the Stripe API when it needs them. So you can see here that we've got both of those keys in that environment variable file. Next, what we'll do is we want to also mention that when we're deploying to Heroku, now we'll talk about this at the end of the tutorial, when we're deploying to Heroku, there's some configurations that we need to set, and I'll show you how to use these Stripe publishable keys in a deployment mode. So the next thing we want to do is actually create our views. So this is the views to actually show the Stripe input form. So let's go over to views, and we'll add in a folder called subscribers, which I've already done. And what we want to do is create two new files. So it's going to be new.html.erb. We're also going to add in another file for the form partial, which gets passed in as well. Okay, so I've made some code previously. It's got a few more classes in it than the original Stripe tutorial. So you can see that Stripe gives you some basic text with a yield in there. I've added a few more classes in, so I just wanted to use that instead. And for our form, let me just grab that as well. I could have easily just used the form that is suggested in here, but for now that's fine. So let's add that in there. One thing to note though is I've actually used a 1 in here. Because there's no subscribers, this is a bit of a hack to get around the fact that there are none initially. So it lets us go back to it, and it initiates a subscriber so that we can actually go back to that particular user. So you'll see here it's accessing a publishable key. So that's fine. We've already instantiated that. Looking at our plan's value, so the data amount, this is in cents. We set up the light plan. So let's go $9, so it's 900 cents, and we'll save that. Okay, so now what we want to do is let's just test this out. Sometimes there can be errors. So what we'll do for cleanliness, let's restart our server and we'll wait for that to load back up. It's just loading up now. We'll refresh our page and you'll notice I'm using lvh.me simply for the fact that we're using subdomains. So let's refresh. Let's create a new school now. Test school 2. Okay, email is test 2 and test, and the subdomain testing school. Let's go and create a new school as a teacher. Now let's go and sign up as a student. So test student at student.com and let's sign up. Okay, so now what we have is the student is allowed to get straight in without actually getting held up at the payments point. So now just we need to pinpoint where we went wrong. I've realized that I can't spell that well, so what we can see here is that I have missed an S in registration, so we needed to go to the Devise registrations and look for a registrations controller, so that's been fixed. The other issue that we had was that I misspelled subscribed, so now the user will actually be subscribed in the database properly. So let's go and refresh and let's try sign in, and what we'll do as a student, we'll go and sign up. And let's go test at student.com and we'll put a password in. Let's go and sign up. So what we'll do now, we're actually getting redirected back to, well, not redirected back, redirected forward to subscribers/new. Let's go and pay for that, and we can put in any email we like, and we'll use the test numbers that we saw earlier on, and we'll pick a date in the future and a 3-digit CVC. Let's press pay. We can see that it all went through. The publishable key was correct, and now it's redirecting us forward to the projects. So the projects are all of the courses the student has access to. We haven't created any yet, but if we wanted to take a snippet of what that might look like, we've created one before, so that's what the student would see. So just as a final side note, when we're deploying our Stripe app to Heroku, what we want to do is add in the publishable key in our command line. So if we go over to the Stripe documentation, you'll see all the way at the bottom for the Rails documentation that there's a Heroku config set that we need to add into our command line. So what we'll do, we'll go Heroku config set, and we've called it Stripe publishable key. And what we want to do is add in that publishable key as they have it, so we don't need any brackets, and I'll let you copy in the Stripe publishable key that you'll have for your Stripe application. In addition, you can also see that there's a secret key. All we'd need to do there is have Stripe secret key and add in your Stripe secret key as well. Hit enter for that, and that will allow Heroku to understand the publishable keys that you've got stored locally as well for Stripe. So that's how we're able to use the Stripe API to be able to take subscription payments using the Devise gem. So thanks so much for listening in, and all the best with the projects that you're working on.